How do you typically approach directing a production?
Depending on the project, it's different. Recent projects I used a much more ensemble and collaborative method. With Nell Gwynn, because of COVID, we kind of used a mixed method, I would say. We started out doing a lot of character building and sort of digital ensemble building, I suppose, to give the actors in the cast the ability to really sort of like hone down who their character was within this world and focus on like what this world was, I guess, from a conceptual level. Nell Gwynn's a play that bends history. It's sort of rooted in a reality, but it says, that reality is maybe not exactly what we want to focus on. And so we'll enlarge it, we'll heighten it, we'll think about it in a different way. And then we went into a bit more of a traditional rehearsal process. It was strange. The actors had about a 2-month lag between like the beginning rehearsals and coming into the theater space. So it meant a lot of reliance on their part to learn all their lines, think about like what they wanted to do, and then come in and really ready to make choices and make big, bold choices. And in this particular instance, because of some of the limitations of COVID, we had to go even bolder than we may have thought about doing before. So, like I said, it's a little bit different from process to process. Nell Gwynn, I would say, is a bit more of the quote-unquote traditional, but we've like played around with it and allowed the cast hopefully to like build together as an ensemble in a way that adds to the overall storytelling in a slightly different manner than a traditional process.
Did your concept change due to the pandemic?
Not significantly. The process changed. Conceptually, we started working, well, I should say, everybody except for the costume designer, Allison, who is a terminal project, sort of came and started working on it at the same time, which would have been roughly late last February. And so COVID hit right at the beginning of our process of sort of formulating it. And even though I think in those early days we thought, oh, COVID's going to go away quickly, we weren't thinking about it as like a long-term thing, we did always have it in the back of our mind. We looked at this play as a way of like really focusing on theatricality and the relationship between theater and audiences and performance and like performativity of like how we perform in the world, and specifically in this restoration time period. So we went into it hoping that we would have a real audience to play around with, and I think that's the major change that COVID like impacted, is that that audience relationship, all the interactive elements and participatory elements that we would have liked to incorporated. Certain elements of the set even like sort of draw that in. We have these box seats that are over here on the stage that were intended to have like actual audience members sitting in them so that they could sort of always be surrounding the space. But with the limitations of that, we had to sort of strip it back, and also then start really focusing on allowing the actors to like understand that like without having that physical audience there, a lot more is placed on them to make it big, to make it theatrical, to make it much, much more than maybe like a certain rooted reality that would have existed in an earlier version of it.
But what challenges have you faced in trying to tell this story in the middle of a pandemic?
I think the biggest thing is just like the issues surrounding COVID safety, right? As a director, you think about setting up the stage in a particular way, right? With the challenge of this show and dealing with COVID, like all of the blocking choices had to be done in a way that was less organic than I would like. Things were much more pre-scripted, and making sure that we kept specific social distancing guidelines. Dealing with the type of masks that we're using in the show is something that is challenging for everyone. But in certain ways, I think it helps unlock certain aspects of people's acting work that they may not have like known that they could get in touch with. So those are some of the major challenges. But ultimately, I don't think it impacts it significantly. We got to do some really fun things because of COVID, right? And I won't give too much away, but like just this whole system of like a new physical language that we created based on a combination of stage directions and action that are in the play and between characters, that actually helps the story come to life in a much more imaginative and fun way, and hopefully will make people laugh, but also make people think, oh wow, there's so much more beyond what the text is saying that tells meaning within a play.
What about Nell's story do you think audiences will appreciate and gravitate towards today?
Oh, well, it's a rags to riches story. We all love that. It's a bit of a Cinderella story, But ultimately, deep down in it, I think the thing that people should resonate is that um, Nell, within this specific historical period, ultimately was in this version of the play, or this version of a history that's being told, is shown to have so much individual agency. Like the choices that she makes are able to like depict and indicate and change the way that she goes through her lives. And so hopefully, when people see this, they understand that all of the choices that we make are intentional. We have the ability to shape our own lives. We have the ability to question norms that may already exist, in a way of like changing the world for a better future.
What about the designer's concepts helped inform your own concepts for telling the story?
Well, it's interesting because we really work together in a very collaborative fashion. So like often sometimes like a director will come to it and say, here's my vision, I want you to fit within this, and then the designers bring something to it. We sat down from day one and talked as a collaborative unit about like what we found in the play that resonated, and ultimately a lot of us really looked at these things of theatricality and meta theater and the idea of like theater and audiences. And so I wouldn't say that like the designers changed my mind about anything, right? Because we were constantly always working together, which is the way that I think all theater making should be. We should really like learn and continue to harness that ability to collaborate with that big C, I like to say.
How does Jessica Swale's dialogue help make this story accessible to modern audiences? How are the themes relevant today?
In one of the interviews, Jessica Swale says like, Restoration theater often had a lot of verse. Not all, and we were moving out of a period where there was a bit more prose added into like plays. But she said, it felt like, and I'm paraphrasing, that to do it in verse would like to sort of like make it stilted. It would slow it down. It would not make it as accessible for a contemporary audience. And so she's written the play in a manner that impacted all of our choices, which is that it's very contemporary language. The way that the characters speak with each other, the idioms, like the idiosyncrasies that they have, even the pacing that are within the lines, really keeps it moving and keeps you engaged with these characters and doesn't make it feel like you're looking at a history piece or a documentary piece or a museum piece.
What was the importance of music in the theater during the restoration?
When theaters shut down during the interregnum, there was still performance happening. It just wasn't spoken, right? And so it was sort of like, it was actors that people thought were bad. And so music concerts, or small, sometimes a little bit larger, still kind of happened. And so that bled back over into like restoration theater. Music always is something that we connect with. You can just play a tune and you immediately can understand something or feel a meaning or get a meaning from it or an emotional context. And so I think that is one of the things that the restoration theater was really doing, because things were not natural. It wasn't realism, right? It was like bold, it was big.
Nell Gwynn is a play about making theater. How much does the show play on the stereotypes of theater or theater people?
Well, so I think the writing really digs into like the stereotypes of playing and making theater. I don't know like if we necessarily produced it in a way of like focusing on the stereotypes, right? Some of the actors in the production have made some really strong choices to indicate those, and a lot of it like is in line with the text, right? There's a lot of commentary about specifically like the idea of what is theater, what is its purpose, how do we do it, what is acting, right? Do we need to be trained, right? Do we need to like have a specific physicality or a specific vocal quality? Do we need to like actually like do more than like what is beyond the page? And so there's a lot of in jokes that if you're not a theater person you may not get, right? But the people that are involved in the theater, I think, will constantly be laughing at these like almost asides that are written into it that are related to the concept of theater.
Did anything surprise you in your research for the production?
Doing the research on the historical Nell Gwynn, how little actual evidence there is of like her as an actor. And it did impact like the overall sort of way that we design the show, right? So she's almost known more for being a celebrity than she is for being an actor, right? there is a certain aspect for the fact that because she had a relationship with King Charles, that her celebrity probably outgrew her fame as an actor. So you would wonder if she did not have that relationship, how she would be remembered in the history books, right? She was really well known as a comic actor, and not necessarily a very good dramatic actor.
What do you hope audiences come away with after seeing Nell Gwynn?
The major thing that I want them to take away and hope that they take away, and I don't know if it'll be possible through the way that they're accessing it, is just to realize how unique theater is, right? That it has the ability to do things that other mediums do not. There's a certain capacity for connection amongst audience members, amongst cast members, amongst everybody involved, that is very different than other ways that we access normal life. Theater doesn't have to be real. It doesn't have to be rooted in like an everyday daily reality that is our daily drudgery, right? I guess it's not drudgery for everybody, right? But I hope that they take away that we have an avenue to show the best of us in different manners. And theatricality is what we should be striving for on our stages. Try not to like compare ourselves to other medium, identify ourselves as something that is unique.